In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make an awesome effect that Command Zone uses to keep its viewers aware of all of the cards being played during their Commander Series game nights. Of course, this works for Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Digimon, and really any tabletop game. It's a super simple process, but it'll really improve the experience for your viewers. First, we'll be starting by importing our top-down gameplay footage. This can be raw footage, or you can bring in a Premiere file into After Effects. If you're going to use a Premiere file, I suggest doing all of your video editing first, and then bringing it to After Effects afterwards. There's a couple ways to do this. The first is to drag and drop the entire file into your project panel, and the second is to select any clips where you want animation, or select all of them, right-click and select Replace with After Effects Composition. Adobe uses something called Dynamic Link, which allows most Adobe products to communicate with each other to keep everything updated with the most recent changes. When you replace the clips with an After Effects composition, it creates an After Effects file containing those clips that you can then add your animations and effects to. Those animations will automatically be visible in your Premiere file. You can even see it in real time if you have them both open. Although for the sake of your computer, I don't recommend running them simultaneously unless you have a good reason. When you're done with your animations, you can just save and head back to Premiere to finish things off, maybe adding whoosh sound effects when the cards move or something. For my example, I'll just use this short recording I made. I don't really need to do any cuts, and it's short enough that rendering in After Effects isn't a big deal. If you've got a long video though, definitely use Premiere for your editing. So I've got my video in After Effects. Let's locate the first card we want to pop out. Identify the name and set, and then search it up on Scryfall. We'll download the PNG file and repeat for the rest of the cards. I'll just do 2 for this demonstration. Drag and drop them all into your project panel. If there's a lot of them, make a folder for them by clicking this icon. If you drag the first card into the timeline, it'll automatically place the object in the center of your canvas. Right-click on the layer and choose Pre-Compose. I'm going to name this Card Image for the sake of clarity. Now move your playhead to the spot where you want the effect to start and hit the left bracket key. This will bring the beginning of the layer to the playhead. Now move your playhead to the point where you want the card to be full-sized. I'll go with 10 frames forward. Turn the layer into a 3D layer and position and rotate the card however you'd like it to be. Pressing P will bring up the position properties, and R will bring up the rotation property. Keep in mind any text elements or other cards that may need to be on the screen and allow room as needed. Now click on the stopwatches to lock in those keyframe values. Make sure to keyframe the Z rotation as well if the cards on the battlefield are upside down, so that you can animate that rotation. Now move the playhead back to the start of this layer. Now we need to move the card back until it fits right on top of the real card. In After Effects, positive is moving away from you and negative is towards you. I'll push this back until it's just about the right size. Zoom in by holding Ctrl or Command and hitting the plus key. It doesn't need to be perfect, just close. The card here is tilted just a bit, so I'm going to rotate it about the same amount and get this right on top. You'll notice that After Effects has created new keyframes for us automatically. Zoom out and play the effect a few times by holding Shift and pressing the spacebar. Hitting space again will pause the preview. It may be choppy the first time you play it while your computer renders the frames, especially if your footage is high res or if you're working on a slower computer. To make it easier on your computer, you can reduce the quality of the preview to 1/3 of the resolution. This will make the preview render in low res, but don't worry, it doesn't impact the actual video in any way. If the speed of the animation looks good, we can move on. If not, adjust the keyframes until it feels right. We can make it look a little smoother by adding easing. I'm not going to go in depth into what easing is and how to use it because frankly there's a ton of tutorials on the topic. I'll leave one of my favorites in the description if you want to learn more. For now, we're just going to select our keyframes, right-click, Keyframe Assistant, and select Easy Ease. Alright, so our motion is all set, but we still have a problem. The illusion of our card popping off the table and flying up for the viewer to read It's kind of ruined by the fact that the real card is still sitting there on the table. No worries, we can fix that. Our camera hasn't moved and neither has the table, so all we need to do is grab a still from just before we played the card and overlay a section of that image above the card. Before we do that though, a quick note. If your lighting is really consistent and your table and camera don't move throughout the entire video, you can most likely grab a still image of the table at the beginning of the game when no cards have been played, and reuse that image throughout the video to hide all the cards behind. Whichever you do, the process is the same. First, we're going to need to grab the frame. Go to Composition, Save Frame As, and then select Photoshop Layers. Choose the folder for it to render to, and then grab the image and drop it right back into the project panel. Give it a name like Starting Board, and then drag it into the timeline. When images are placed in the timeline, they automatically are set to the full duration of the file. So let's hold Option or Alt and click the left bracket key to trim the starting point to match the beginning of our animation. Drag the layer between your footage and the card image in the layer panel. Now you should see that the real card is hidden under the image. If you used a frame from just before the card was played, you might be able to get away with leaving it covering the entire canvas. But I don't like to do that in case someone's arm or something ends up in the frame and is just frozen in place during the animation. So while the overlay layer is selected, I like to click on this rectangle tool and draw a rectangle around the card area. This should create a mask hiding everything around the rectangle. If for some reason it doesn't blend smoothly with the background, twirl down through the mask options until you see Feather, and increase the feathering a bit. Now we need the card to go back down onto the table. To do that, select the keyframe at the start of the animation and copy and paste it to the timeline where you want the animation to end. Copy the second keyframe and paste it 10 frames before the last one. Make sure to use Alt or Option right bracket on the final keyframe for both the card and the overlay layer. And that's it. Watch it through a few times and make sure it looks good. You might be thinking, that's a lot of work. I don't want to have to do this for every card that gets played. Luckily, you don't have to. It's actually really easy to duplicate this effect for any card anywhere on the table. For this, we're going to use the Essential Graphics window. If that's not already in your workspace, go up to Window and look for Essential Graphics. Select the card layer and pre-compose it. Make sure the attributes go inside of this composition. That will ensure your keyframe properties will be there when we duplicate it. I'll name this Pop-Out Effect. This will now become the template for my future card effects. Double-click on the Pop-Out Effect composition to enter it, then double-click on the card image to enter that one. Here's where we use the Essential Graphics panel. Go up to the primary dropdown and choose Pop-Out Effect. Then click and drag the image layer into the panel. What this does is tells After Effects that the Pop-Out Effect composition is our primary composition, and that the dragged-in properties should be able to be modified from that composition's properties. If we go back to the main comp and look at the Pop-Out Effects properties, we now see a new option called Essential Properties. We have a few more things to add to this before our template is complete. Let's go back into the Pop-Out Effect composition and drag our position and rotation properties in as well. Now if we go back into the main comp, we'll see the keyframe properties appear in our Essential Properties dropdown. Now we're ready to quickly make however many of these effects as we need. So I'm going to locate the point in the timeline where I want the second effect to start, and drag the Pop-Out Effect composition from the project panel to that point in the timeline. This is now just an exact duplicate of the first one, but that'll change in just a second. Take our second card image from the project panel and drag it on top of the image property in our Essential Properties dropdown. As you can see, it changes the image of this one without impacting the original. It also automatically creates a folder called Media Replacement Comps. Every time you replace an image, it'll appear here. Select the first keyframe and hold Shift and select the last keyframe. Press J or K to jump forward or backward until your playhead is exactly on one of those keyframes, and then use the values over here to move the card into place. Now when we play it, it should come up and go back just like it should. Do this for as many cards as you've got, and don't forget to use your background image to hide the cards when they pop up. If you need to keep the card popped out for a longer or shorter period, Just grab all of the end keyframes and drag them together wherever you need them in the timeline. Then drag out the end of the overlay layers to match. See? Super quick and easy once you've got the first one done. To make this process faster, I recommend making a few versions of this templated composition to cover common scenarios. For example, when you've got a 4-person game, 2 of the player's cards will be upside down just like mine was. So you'd use this template for that since it's got the rotation keyframes. If you make another version without the rotation, you can just use that for the right side up players. On top of that, you may want to have separate templates where the card pops out to the left, center, or right of the screen. That way you have options for placing other elements on the screen. At this point, we can render this out as is, or if we're using an Adobe Premiere file, you can go back into Premiere. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. I'll help you out the best I can. And if you use this in one of your videos, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to see what you guys are making. Keep an eye out for my next video where I'll show you how to animate highlighter effects for explaining or evaluating cards. If you're not subscribed, make sure you hit that button so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.